This is another edition of Owatonna as They Saw It. Thank you very much for joining us. This is Todd Hale, your host on Owatonna as They Saw It, a series of videotapes in which we talk about some of the great things that have happened here in the city of Owatonna. And in this particular issue, which is being filmed on December 3rd of 1993, we're going to address medical history in the city of Owatonna, and specifically the development of the Owatonna Clinic, which at this particular point has become obviously the major medical center here in the community of Owatonna. And our special guests on the program are ones that certainly would be able to relate the history of the Owatonna Clinic and the medical history of Owatonna better than anybody else. Dr. A.J. Olson and Dr. Frank Anderson. Both of these gentlemen, of course, were the beginnings of the Owatonna Clinic as such. And speaking of the devils, here they are right here. Dr. Anderson, good to see you. Huh?
I hear you were having trouble with your memory, so we thought we'd make a house call.
We brought our bags, Todd, in that.
I can see that you have, and look at here what went into my hand here, a mint. Now this has a history to it. This is a tradition when you talk about the mints given by Dr. Olson. And there it is right there, and we're going to tell you all about that here as we talk about our Owatonna medical history here in the community of Owatonna. Thank you very, very much for doing, and thanks to our guests for being here as well, Dr. Anderson and Dr. Olson. When you talk about, I guess, the ones who arrived first here in Owatonna as a part of the what was known later as the Owatonna Clinic, indeed these two are the ones. Dr. Olson was the first one to come here to Owatonna. That was back in the year 1946. I might add both these gentlemen are retired now, or tired, or whatever the case may be, right? And Dr. Anderson joined Dr. Olson here in 1949. Dr. A.J., let's talk about, first of all, how you happened to get to Owatonna.
Well, I just got out of the Army. We'd spent 2.5 years overseas in the Philippines and Okinawa. And I married a girl from California, and she'd never been in cold climate except in the mountains. So I said, we'll go back to Minnesota for 1 year, and then we'll go back to California. Well, needless to say, we never went back.
You never went back to California, huh?
So I went up to the St. Paul, to the placement bureau, and there was different areas that we could go to. And there was one up in Thief River Falls. That was too far north. St. Cloud, I didn't like that. And in St. Paul, it was a nice opportunity there, but I'd have to spend $15 a month to park my car, and I didn't want to do that. And besides having to go to different hospitals and spend so much time on. And then we had a chance to go to Austin or Owatonna, but Owatonna seemed like a nice town. Dr. Moorhead had been ill and was looking for help, and so it was a nice town, nice trees, and it looked like a community of about my hometown of Cloquet was about 8,000. This was 9,000 at that time.
Okay.
And so I said to my wife, I think we should try this.
So you did. You brought Dorothy here.
We came here with everything we owned in the back seat of an old 41 Packard.
Is that right? Now, was Dr. Moorhead's office downtown where you started, or what?
1 West Main Street, right by the fire hall.
Okay. That was your first office?
That was my first office. It was an office that was about 68 feet long and 22 feet wide, and we had crammed in there. And it was a nice little office. I thought it was nice.
So was Dr. Moorhead still practicing then when
he was practicing, and then he and I practiced together, and then he had a Meniere's disease, which made him dizzy, and he was losing his hearing. And so one day after we had surgery, and he gave me a book, and he says, I want you to do the surgery tomorrow. A fellow had a broken knee, and so we operated together, and he said, on the way down, I'm going up to Minneapolis to have some my hearing checked and some tests and some treatments, and I never saw him again. So,
really? He just retired right there, huh?
Right there, yes. And then so I practiced alone for a year, and I went for 5 months, never left town. It was just day and night and day and night. And the police was kind of good to me, because every time they'd have an accident or drunk at a police station, they'd call me in because I was a young doctor. You know, needless to say, we were hired for $300 a month.
Is that right?
I was working on the salary, so it didn't make any difference. So I never did see him again.
Never did see him again.
And then so Frank was up in Little Falls. I better let him tell his story. And then So I called him up.
Yeah,
one
you
day.
and Frank were actually, Frank, weren't you in medical school together?
Yes.
You two, you'd known each other in medical school?
Right, we always knew each other from, Frank's father was a superintendent of schools in Cloquet, and we lived about 2 blocks apart.
Oh, really?
And so when we were at Scouts, we were both Eagle Scouts, and when we were at camp, in the summertime, I'd be patrol leader one year, and he'd be the assistant. The next year, he'd be the patrol leader, and I'd be the assistant.
So
We were practicing to practice together because his dad was a veterinarian, and so we'd go out on house calls with him as a veterinarian.
to the farms, huh? Or wherever.
Yep.
Is that right?
Cut the horns off the cows and
Yeah, is that right? And do all those. Well, where were you now in the time, and of course our time, look at the old time fly here, so we have to move along, but after a couple of years of practicing on your own, Dr. Olson, you got tired of that, right?
Oh, it was, yes.
It was grueling.
It was really grueling day and night, and then I had a patient over by Moorestown, and I had been real ill and sick, and I had to go make house calls over there. And then one day I took my wife up to the cities to go shopping after about 5 months. And they were very critical of me because I wasn't there when they wanted me. And I said to my wife, I said, we can't do this anymore. So then I called Anderson up at Little Falls and said, come on down here. I think this is a better community than
Little Falls,
Falls.
So you were practicing on your own up there, Frank?
No,
or
I was in a partnership.
You were?
I was all very well settled. Just had 2 kids and planned to build a house on the river up there. Beautiful spot, beautiful plan. If anybody needs a plan for a house, that's it. Ideal
You've got
plan.
it, huh?
Oh yeah,
You've
it's
got
a
it.
marvelous plan.
Well, did it take much convincing of Dr. Olson to get you down here, or what?
Well, it took a little. I had to come down, look at the town. The town looked lovely. His office was fine.
So you did make the decision to come south then,
Yep.
apparently, huh? So that was in January of 1949.
January 1949, because they came down, I think, the 30th of December, because I remember that very well, because we had the Cosmopolitan Club here at the time, and we had a raffle, and I had some leftover geese, and so my wife, we had to take them home, and my wife cooked this goose, and I tell you, it started out real big, and it ended up like a chicken, see? And we had about 3 inches of lard on the bottom.
Is that right?
Our first and only goose.
The first and only, the one and
But
only.
we
huh?
served that to Anderson's for that New Year's meal.
Yeah. So the first office of Dr. Olson and Dr. Anderson was at 117 West Main Street, next to the fire hall,
Yes,
right?
sir. Right.
And how long did you stay there, Frank, in that office?
In that office, well, we built our present clinic in 1954.
Okay.
But times were a little different down there. House calls were $5. Office calls were $3. We'd deliver your baby for $35. But a little while later, prices went up, and we delivered your baby for $50. But we examined the mother every month until she was due and delivered her, and we examined the little kid, prenatal care, for the first year for nothing.
For nothing.
Right.
Is that right? They can just bring them in, huh?
All I had to pay for the immunizations.
Yeah, that was it. My gosh, that has changed a little bit. And I would guess that how long did mother stay in the hospital when they had a baby?
Oh, I tell you, they used to stay. We had a regular routine. They'd be flat in their bed about 5 days. Then they would dangle the 6th day, and then they get up and walk on the 7th day. And then they'd go home. And then I had a lady who had a blood clot, went to her lungs, and I really sweated her out. And I said, this is the last time that any of my OBs are going to stay in bed. They're going to get up the same day. And they said, you couldn't do that. And I did. And I said, you get up. In fact, some of them get off the delivery table and walk to the room. And they never had a blood clot after that.
You did? Well, that's what they do today now.
That's right.
That's what they're
That's
doing
right.
today.
Yeah, that's
Exactly.
right. Yeah.
Well, you were ahead of your time on that then,
That's
huh?
all right. I wasn't going to go through that.
I mentioned there were mothers who thought you were crazy, making them get up and walk to the room, huh? I can imagine. Well, obviously, your space requirements apparently, how did the vision of the Owatonna Clinic? It was not known as the Owatonna Clinic downtown. Was it just known as Dr.
No.
Anderson and Dr. Olson, or what?
Well, no, Dr. Honath came in '52 to the group, so then we became the Owatonna Clinic.
Okay.
There were certain advantages of being a clinic. When we bought our supplied materials, the clinics got a better break than the
They
private
did, huh?
doctors.
Oh, sure, I suppose.
So
yeah.
that was one of the reasons.
A little political move, huh?
Right.
Dr. Honath coming, Frank, what prompted that one?
Well, we
addition?
live 40 miles from the Mayo Clinic and 60 miles from the University of Minnesota, where they got super-duper surgeons, and so we thought we had to upgrade the surgery here, and that's what we did.
Okay.
It was a time of change all the way. You know, sulfa had just come out. We had sulfadiazine, sulfathiazole. Penicillin was new on the market, and if you had penicillin, you had to be shot every 3 hours. You had no long-action penicillin.
Oh, really?
It's changed.
Okay, yeah.
And after 49, after I've been here, changes in the hospital came about. We put in an x-ray room, a new x-ray machine, had a röntgenologist come 3 times a week. We had an emergency room that was developed.
Yeah.
It was time of change all the way around.
Well, I can imagine.
And in the whole hospital, we built a new hospital in 1959.
Yes. How did you come about the property where the clinic is located on Southview?
Well, that's an interesting story, because we realized that we couldn't stay where we were, because people would come in the front door and they'd walk in and look over and then walk home and have supper, and then they'd come back and they couldn't find a place to do. So we were looking for something. St. John's Church bought that property, and they were going to build out there. Well, then they realized that, well, the city council passed an ordinance that you had to have so much parking space for each number of members, and it was impossible for them to get the church built on that property. So we had an opportunity to buy that land right next, which was fortunate for us because it's right next to the hospital.
Yes. So the first new clinic, which was certainly not anywhere near what the building is today, there's been a 3 additions on.
Oh, no, we've had, I think Frank and I talked about that, we've had 7 additions.
7 additions?
There have been 7 additions.
There have been.
About every 5 years, we would have to expand, and it just kept on growing and growing and expanding, and they needed parking space, and so we had to go east, and then picked up Dr. Roberts' place and go away to the Cedar Street.
Yeah. Before we get off the early history here, run by some names of the physicians who were here besides you when you came to town.
Okay, now Dr. Moorhead was on Main Street. Dr. Schaefer was where the Roxy Theater building was. Dr. Roberts was where the post office is now. And Dr. Stronsky was up over the drugstore in the and what building was that?
Roar Drugs. He was Roar Drugs, wasn't he? Yeah.
And then
Dr. Lundquist was
Dr.
up there.
Lundquist was up there. And Dr. Nelson was downstairs by Kriskow's, and Wilkowski was up over Kriskow's. Dr. Sen was down where the on Bridge Street, where the Travel Bureau is now.
There was McIntyre and McEnany.
Yeah, McIntyre had his own office over there by the Armory, and McEnany was in the
and that was McEnany's father.
That's the father's
Jim
president.
McEnany's
C.T.
father.
McEnany,
C.T.
Cliff McEnany,
McEnany.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
and then Bergs and Dewey were down where the penny store is now, in that vicinity.
Is that right? Okay. And again, this year is 1993. We're talking about so this was back a lot of years, and of course, there were lots of doctors who had their own offices, and gradually, as that era kind of went over, and obviously now, this particular time, the clinic is besides is the only really medical facility in Owatonna. There are no independent doctors working anymore, are there?
No. I mean, Dr. Henry and Dr. McEnany, were the last to join. But right now, Todd, it's so expensive to have all the equipment, and you have to have the facilities, and you have to give the service that the people are demanding, and I think they should have.
Yeah.
And an independent man can't do that.
So, when you got Frank here with you, and how did you pair off Frank on the on call, the overnights, this type of thing? And very seldom did a night go by you weren't called.
We were usually on call all the time, except a half a day a week, and we'd leave at noon, and we'd be back on call at midnight. And every other weekend, we'd take off Saturday afternoon after we got done, till Sunday night at midnight. We always went back on call at midnight. The main reason was we wanted coverage for our OBs almost as routinely as we possibly could.
Yeah. The babies were and that was the real demanding thing, wasn't it? The expectant moms and the coverage of and the delivery of babies, of course.
And they never would come in at a convenient time.
No, no.
At the time we were going to go to the football game or something, then they'd come say, I think I'm in labor.
Yeah.
We made house calls all the time. A lot of people didn't have cars, and we'd make house calls out in the country and in stormy weather because the farmers couldn't get out. They didn't have big equipment like they do now. And so we'd plow out there and drive out there.
Any idea how many babies you delivered over your career?
Oh, I think I think over 2,000.
Really?
Yeah. And then after the later years, after I had my detached retina, and then I decided I should get out of the OB business. So.
But every doctor, Frank, was in OB. I mean, there was no specialization as such, was there? Pretty much at that time.
Well, that's right. Everybody did most everything that they thought they were capable of doing.
Yeah. So you delivered babies too, right? Lots of them.
Oh, yes.
Oh, he delivered after he came to Owatonna. And then, oh yeah, another thing was tonsils. I never liked to do tonsils. And so when Frank got here, I said, Frank, how do you like to do tonsils? He said, yeah. He said, yeah, all right. And I said, okay, you're the tonsil man.
It was passed on that way. One of the things about doing tonsils, if you did grown-ups and so forth, we did them under local anesthesia because it was too dangerous to put them to sleep with the anesthetics we had at that time. And they were kind of a little bloody mess. You injected them back there and then took them out. Well, after Dr. Honath came here, he said, I hate to do local tonsils. I hate to do local tonsils. And so one was scheduled, and I was up there scrubbing, and Dr. Honath came and pushed me aside. He says, I'm the surgeon. I'll have to do it. I hate it, but I'll do it. But later they changed the thing so it became much easier to do. Anesthesia's gotten much better.
Yeah, let's talk about anesthetics a little bit and what they were back in 1946 and 49 when you came here. Primarily ether? Was that?
Drop ether. I remember, Todd, I shudder when I think about it. I remember some of the doctors just having a accident patient and they didn't have an anesthetist. So they called down and said, would you mind coming up and give the anesthetic for the for the patient? And I said, no, I will. So I went up and administered ether. And the boy had a compound fracture of the leg, and it was a boy about 10 or 12. And they were debating on whether they should take the leg off or not. And we stepped over the curtain there, and I said, no, I think if I were you, I would just plate it and we'll sew it back together. And so I said, okay, so that's what they did. That boy's walking on that leg, you know.
Still walking on the leg.
Yeah. and then we had phenethol. That's what the only thing, wasn't it? Phenethol.
That was the first one to come out to us.
And then the intravenous phenethol, which was nice.
Because when I had tonsils out as a kid, I remember the gas mask that went over my face.
You put the gas mask over your face till you're down under, then the doctor quickly looked in there and looked around and took him out and stopped the bleeding. And
was that gas, though? Was that after ether? Or was that something of an advancement?
Well, it probably was with the gas. I mean, I don't know if it could have been...
well, they have nitrous oxide, but nitrous oxide is awful dangerous stuff. Usually you use ether.
Ether, they put a mask on and then you put drop ether on there and then you go.
We are talking about the history of medicine, really, in Owatonna. Doctors Olson and Anderson, who began the Owatonna Clinic, as we know it today, starting out very, very small. As a matter of fact, the first clinic itself had how many examining rooms? The first new clinic that you built up there?
Up at where we are now?
Where you are now. You know.
Had 8.
8 rooms, so that was really a big...
It was. I tell you, when we first moved up there, my legs were tired from running up and down. Oh, yes, it was. So.
And now you get lost in there.
Oh, I get lost up there all the time now. I'm just amazed. I walk in the door and I said, now, where am I? And how do I get here? And who are you? In fact, people say to me, who are you?
That's right. I can imagine they do, don't they? How did you get a hold of each other? Did you have it? You didn't. I mean, paging systems weren't like they are today. How did you keep in touch with?
Well, we had a telephone system. You wanted to be always answered, and so when we two were together, we had a common line called a party line. And when Dr. Honath came, we added one, And so actually he ended up with 3 phones in his house, and he said, I never could figure out which phone I was supposed to be answering. And then Dr. DeWord came, and he got the 4th ring on the line, and he said, I hated the 4th ring because I always had to listen to all those others first.
Before his came, huh? So Dr. DeWord was the next one after Dr. Honath, is that right, in the chain of...
Well, we had a man by the name of Dr. Huff. Dr. John Huff was here for 3 years. Then he went into ear, nose, throat, and lives in the cities, and actually he comes down as our consultant yet.
Okay. And Dr. DeWord then followed that then. So
Right.
he was the 4th partner then, I said,
Right.
the fourth partner.
He came, he just came out of the Air Force. He was in Phoenix, and he was from southern Minnesota and wanted to be in this part of the country. And their folks had a cabin up in Green Lake, and so he had 2 children, I think, when he came.
Yeah.
So.
How this has changed so much, and the doctors today don't have weekend work usually. It's covered by either Mayo Clinic or whatever at this particular point, and indeed it was a real commitment back then. And your families endured it though, right? I mean, you had to skip many, many things of your youngsters as they grew up, I assume.
That is true.
Right?
Well,
They were used to us disappearing.
We had 5 children, 3 girls and 2 boys, and wouldn't you know that he has 5 children, 3 girls and 2 boys. And my wife would feed the children about 5:30 or 5:45, and then Frank and I would eat between 7 and 8 o'clock when we were through. I used to like to, after I left the office, I used to go to make rounds and want to get everything done before I came home. So.
Yeah, but immediately you'd be gone, Frank, right? All of a sudden you disappear.
Oh, we disappear,
Huh?
yeah, we disappear.
Yeah.
And then the next step for growth in the clinic was to add an internist, and Dr. Hilker then joined us, so we were then 5. And we had coverage for surgery and medical internist, and then family practice.
Yeah. Actually, before you people retired, you still hadn't had an arrangement like they have now, where you had so much time off as the doc. You know, at the time you retired, you were still putting in long hours, right?
Oh yes, yes, we were putting in. Although it was a lot better because we had a half day off. In fact, the last couple of years, I took all day Wednesday off. I used to take when you go out to the lake. That was another thing. When we have a cottage over in Lake Francis, and with the 2 of us together, and so when I was out the lake, Frank covered for me, and when he was at the lake, I covered for him. And so we always had coverage.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, before we run out of time, I mentioned at the beginning that Dr. Olson presented me with a mint, and he kind of sneaks it into your hand. I think any of you who remember that knew that it almost took you by surprise. There it was. How did the mint start?
Well, about 40 years ago, I quit smoking. And so instead of smoking, I'd reach in and have them take a mint. And some little child would come in, and they were good, and I said, here, you were good today, and here's a mint. Next time they come in, and I said, wasn't I good today? And I said, well, yes. Well, where's my mint? And so that kind of started it. And then with the older people, they'd come in, and I'd say, well, I think everything's been fine today. Now here, let's have a little mint, and then go home, and then they'd take that and laugh, and they put it in their purse, or they put it in, and then next time they'd come in and said, don't I get a mint today? And I said, yes. I said, I didn't get one last time. I said, I guess I owe you one then. Yes, you do. And then I used to buy them at 200 pounds at a time, because then they paid the freight. And I think they were about 29 cents a pound at that time. And so I went through a lot of
You went through a lot of mints.
In fact, people yet, when I go up to this mall or so, people will come out and reach their hand out there and said, now, where's my mint? And I said, well, gee, I've been retired now 8 years.
It really got to be a tradition, didn't it? Huh? It got to be a real tradition.
It's interesting, way back when, my family doctor used to give out little horehound candy.
Oh, sure.
Way back.
Horehound candies, yeah. But Dr. Olson was the only one of the crew that really established the mint, to be the mint doctor, wasn't he? Let's talk about, you came in holding these bags here. I understand, in fact, you got 2 different bags here, so we got to talk about these a little bit, huh?
Well, I tell you, we always had to have our cars like an emergency cars, because you never could tell when you're going to be called for an accident or something like that. So now this bag was, in fact, this is the first bag I ever bought. And this had emergency supplies in it. It had stethoscope, it had gloves,
Here we go. Now, let's
and
hold
it had,
these up now.
it had
These are the-
suture material, it had scissors and gloves and packing, and it even had a speculum in there,
Oh,
and all
you
kinds
still
of,
got it packed full.
yes,
Huh?
a speculum and
What is this?
a speculum.
What is
for-
that?
Vaginal
vaginal
speculum.
speculum.
Okay,
So,
all right. And
if people are bleeding,
here's the traditional. You used this many years, I'll bet you, huh?
yeah. In
So
fact,
this was the bag. This was the bag that you carried. You carried with you in your car, then, right?
and we sewed more than one child on the kitchen table at the lake, because at the lake, someone is always either getting in barbed wire or cutting in there. In fact, one of the men in town, a professional man, came one Sunday morning, sitting there, and he with about a 2-inch laceration over his left forehead. And I said, well, we'll have to put some stitches in there. He said, come on in the house. I said, no, can't we do it out here? And I said, okay. And then so I got a syringe out. I said, what's that for? I'm going to put some Novocaine. Oh, no, just suture it up. So I sutured him up Sunday morning in the back of my car. and I said, come on in a week and I'll take the stitches out. He said, can I do it? I said, okay.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
What's the other bag here, Frank? Now this is a little more extensive, right?
This is the one you usually see when the doctor comes on a house call,
Okay.
because this is the one that got all the stuff to,
Oh, like a fishing tackle box.
like a fishing tackle box. Yeah, it has a stethoscope for diagnosis and blood pressure cuff and look in your ears and nose and throat, all those things.
These are all the things you used back.
Yeah.
No longer.
Dr. Olson has an identical bag,
Okay.
holds the same things,
Uh-huh.
and
What are all the pills up here?
well, it depends upon what you got. You know, you can have anything.
Well, see, Todd, it didn't do any good. We went out in the country. And it doesn't do any good to come out and see grandma or see somebody out in the country and give them a prescription because
They can't get in to get it anyway.
So we would carry analgesics and some antibiotics and a few injectables and things that would tide you over to
So when you could get in, huh?
You know, I can remember it was a snowy day. And this lady called up, it was about 4:30 in the afternoon, and said, we're new in town, and my child doesn't feel well, it's got a fever. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, tell me where you live, and then it's kind of a nasty day, and I don't think you'll take your child out. I'll drop by on my way home. You'll do what?
Where'd she live?
Chicago. and so I went out there, and the child had a red ear and red throat. I
Yeah.
gave her a shot of penicillin. But they were amazed.
Oh, my
You'll do what?
So there's the clinic right in a bag. Clinic in a bag.
Well, that's what it is. Actually, there's stuff, all kinds of things in here for medications for asthma, and we used to treat arrhythmias and so forth, which they would never do now at home.
Yeah.
We used to give them a shot to change their arrhythmia right there.
Really?
No, when you say
considered
arrhythmia, that means irregular heartbeats.
Yeah,
Regular heartbeats, yeah.
considered extremely dangerous now, and they'd put you in the hospital to do
Yeah,
it.
I'm sure that's the case. Yeah. So there you have it. That's the official bag, the extensive one that was carried by